Okay, so let's think about where we are in our process, and we're coming to the end of this series. In that we've gone through the reference checks, and now we're thinking about onboarding our new person into the organisation, and certainly onboarding induction, maybe known in your organisation as induction. I think onboarding is the more hip term these days, but yeah, onboarding and induction is vitally important, and it's really important that you think about it before the person comes into the organisation. And by that I mean that you look at the information that you gathered during your interview and think about what training, what support might this person need to be able to move through the induction period in a good way and gain the additional skills and knowledge they might need for the role. Because even if they have everything that you need, they still need to learn your organization. Every organization is different in terms of the way it operates and its culture, and certainly its communication channels and how they work. So there is a lot of things for a new person to learn about how they fit in and how they'll be able to contribute in the future. So it's really important to think about that before your new person starts. And welcoming your new volunteer, again, continues the psychological contract that you've created with them as a part of the recruitment and selection process. What do I mean by that? I mean the way they feel as though they've been treated during the recruitment and selection process starts what's called a psychological contract. It's not a written contract, it's really an emotional contract. How they feel that they'll be treated by you and the organisation going forward. So the way that you welcome new volunteers is really important where that's concerned. And in terms of ensuring effectiveness, ensure that you have done some planning for induction and onboarding before the person comes and arrives on day one. That you've stepped back, you've looked at your interview notes, you've compared it with the person spec and the role description, and you've thought about specific things that you will have in the induction plan. Now, for some people, that might, as you're hearing that might be, but we just sit them with a buddy. And having a buddy is nice, but it's really important that the buddy understands what they are there to do. And that if that includes explaining different systems and processes, that is done in a formalized way. So it's important that you have an onboarding plan. It's ideal if it's written, because then you can share that with the new volunteer, which gives the volunteer the understanding that you have thought about them before they come. And it also will enable you to point out who will be involved in their induction training and what will happen and when. Ensure the person who will be welcoming your new volunteer is well briefed. If that's not you, if you are not going to be the person that is welcoming them on day one, please ensure that that person is well briefed and that your new volunteer knows that it won't be you that will be welcoming them on day one, it will be X, and explain to them X's role. So ensure if it's not you that the person who is doing the welcoming is well briefed. And also that anybody who is affected by this new person's arrival is also briefed. So in terms of being part of a team, that the team are briefed before the new volunteer arrives. You don't want the situation where someone says to a new volunteer, and who are you? And what are you here to do? That doesn't necessarily give the new volunteer a positive, warm, fuzzy feeling. So it's really important that you brief people that will be involved and connected or communicating with the new volunteer about the person who's coming in and their role. So the first week and beyond, So for many organisations, to actually think about induction training is new. And to think about induction training more than just the first day might be new. But what I can tell you in terms of my years of working in organisations is that new people coming into an organisation, whilst they may have the skills and knowledge that you require, still have a lot of learning to do in terms of how they can best contribute in the organisation. So it's really important to recognise, and there is something called induction crisis, which is where the person comes into the organisation and thinks, oh my God, this was not what I thought it was going to be, etc., etc. And, you know, that's an easy time to lose volunteers. So it's really important to think about the way that you are going to induct and onboard somebody more than just the first day. So in terms of the first week, how volunteers will be inducted, who will be inducting them, who will be involved in showing them the ropes after they've joined. Are you going to give them a buddy, allocate them a buddy, and how will that buddy contribute to the training and learning that the person will undertake during their first week? Is there a training checklist? So in terms of you sitting and thinking about your new person coming in terms of listing out the things that they'll need training in, it would be good to have that on a checklist so that the volunteer can understand where they are in their journey to having the knowledge that they'll need, because presumably you have assessed them to have had the skills and the previous attainments and competencies, but they do need to attain knowledge about your organisation and how it operates and how it serves your service users. And how often will you or someone check in with them during their first 4 weeks in terms of how they're getting on, and how can their feedback be gathered? And how might their feedback help you to improve things for future new people joining? So the other thing to consider is after the first week, beyond the first week, is how often the volunteer manager or someone will be sitting down to give the volunteer the opportunity to give and receive feedback in terms of how they are doing. Will that be a 6-month or a 12-month sit down? Now, I know that in many organisations there will be many volunteers who won't get any of those. And what I can say to that is, would you do it with a paid employee? Would you just plonk somebody in the organisation and just leave them to their own devices and not give them feedback or give them developmental support? No, you wouldn't. So treating volunteers in the way that an employed person would be treated in terms of the support that you put around them to enable them to be effective is just as important. And here is, which is in your resource pack, here is an onboarding training review pro forma that we've included in your resource pack that you can use. And here you'll see that in month 1, the things that I've learned and enabled me to do my role. So this requires your volunteer to make a contribution to this. So you're going to ask that your volunteer make some notes about the things that they've learned that have been supportive to their role and the things that they've yet to learn, so that when you're checking in with them, you can see what's left on the training checklist. But what this does is engages them in an understanding that what they do matters. And so if there is a gap, that you can then start to think about, okay, how might we train that for them? How might we provide some training for that so that the gap is filled? All too often, I have heard from volunteers that they've left an organisation because nobody gave them any training, and so they were in a role and they didn't know whether they were doing well or not, and the training that they thought that they would get, they didn't get. So if you have an onboarding training review checklist, as this is, it not only gives your train your volunteer the understanding that you've thought about them, it gives you a route map in terms of how to support them. Again, that might be something new for you to consider in terms of how you onboard your new volunteer, and the sorts of induction training that you might give them, and how that can be structured in a way that is helpful for the volunteer and useful for the organisation. So this is a time to pause the video and consider the implications of onboarding and induction training. Cheryl, what about questions that you've had before about onboarding and inducting new volunteers?
It's really about sort of where on the journey is the volunteer at any point. For example, I've said you've volunteered to come and help out with a role in community impact bucks. It involves learning how to use a particular piece of software, and there is a training pack. But I can't actually make any use of you as a volunteer until you have done that training. So it's how do you make a person feel welcome and make them feel included if they haven't properly joined you yet because they're still doing mandatory training?
Sure. That's a really great question. And that's why having a checklist and an onboarding plan written down is useful, because on day one, you can go through that with the volunteer. This is the plan that we've put in place for you. This particular training is sort of a gateway training in enabling you to actually do these roles, this particular role, so that the volunteer understands from day one that there is some training required before they can do their tasks. And then it would be important for them to understand how long the training is, who is going to sign off the training, and then who is going to induct them into the tasks. So you can imagine that that might come up on the onboarding checklist, where after month one, if the volunteer is not writing down, I've completed that training in their section of the onboarding review, then you as the volunteer manager or as the manager knows that there's something missing in terms of that volunteer being effective. So it's really important for the volunteer to know that there's a path to being able to complete their tasks. And also it gives the volunteer the understanding that you have thought about how you're going to support them to be effective. And that again contributes to a positive psychological contract.
That sounds like a really good idea, a sort of an early welcome session.
Absolutely.
Where these things are gone through. That sounds like a really good idea. I don't have any more questions actually, so thank you very much, Alexandra.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, we have, through this series of videos, gone from preparing and considering whether we have a vacancy because something has changed in our organisation, and then thinking about how we can attract candidates. We've gone through the whole of the process in terms of recruitment and selection. And I know you have some things to say, Cheryl, about, before we finish, about what CIB can offer in terms, just as a reminder of the things that you offer organisations.
Yes, indeed. Our aim is to help the voluntary sector in Buckinghamshire with whatever may be the problem in being effective in delivery. So it may be that an organisation needs advice on governance. It may be that an organisation needs help finding volunteers, or maybe it needs advice on, as we've talked about, DBS checking. It may be that they need some ideas on where to go for funding, or somebody to hold their hand as they put in a funding application, particularly if it's a long and complex one. And we can help charities to help each other and CICs and other organisations by encouraging networking between organisations so that they don't feel that they're on their own fighting the battle. So we do have lots of resources. We will also, for smaller organisations, provide one-to-one support. So you can come in and speak to somebody or have an online discussion and explain exactly what your issues are and get tailored and considered opinions on what you might, how you might address your issues. We publish regular newsletters, which is again about sharing news, which is relevant to the sector. And in terms of volunteers, we have Volunteer Bucks, which is our online volunteer matching service, if you like, which enables volunteers and organisations to connect. So a volunteer can join saying, well, I want to volunteer somewhere, and an organisation can say, I'm the somewhere you want to volunteer. But if anybody wants to have a look at our website, and they can see everything laid out there, follow the breadcrumbs trails to all our various activities. And if in doubt, send us an email. All the contact details are on the website, and we will try and help.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for sharing your expertise with us.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, Cheryl, to work with you to put this series together. And for everyone that's watching this, we hope that this series of videos will provide you with some very valuable resources to be effective in your recruitment and selection of volunteers going forward. So may I just finish by saying thank you for your time and attention, and good luck in your recruitment and selecting. Thank you.